the greatest fighter in the cause of Allah, the man who fought for more than a century. The memory and history of the Arabs are embodied in the personality of this companion, the human tank that terrified the enemies, the destroyer of empires who shattered the arrogance of the Romans and the tyranny of the Persians, the great companion Abu al-Thawr Amr ibn Madi Karib. Most accounts agree that Amr ibn Madi Karib came to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, in the 9th or 10th year of the Hijrah, most likely with a delegation from his tribe, Zubaid, from Yemen. It is narrated that when he arrived in Medina holding the reins of his camel, he asked the people who was the master of the people of this area from Bani Amr ibn Amir. They told him that it was Sa'd ibn Ubadah. He took his camel and walked until he stopped at the door of Sa'd. Sa'd ibn Ubadah ordered his luggage to be unloaded to him, welcomed him and celebrated him. Then he took him to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. There, Amr ibn Madi Karib declared his Islam and stayed in Medina for several days until the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, honored him and gave him gifts as he did with delegations. Then he returned to his country. After the death of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, the Arabian Peninsula witnessed a wave of apostasy wars, where some tribes apostatized from Islam and others refused to pay zakat. It is said that Amr ibn Madi Karib was among those affected by these events and apostatized from Islam, either due to his tribe's influence or because of his combative nature, which did not accept the idea of stability. However, it did not last long. When the armies of Caliph Abu Bakr as-Siddiq began confronting the apostates, Amr ibn Madi Karib realized his mistake and returned to Islam. There are accounts that say that he was captured with some apostates and was taken to Medina, where he declared his repentance and renewed his sincere conversion to Islam. It is narrated that Abu Bakr al-Siddiq, may Allah be pleased with him, addressed him saying, "Aren't you ashamed that you are captured or defeated every day? If you support this religion, Allah will raise you up." He replied, "I will certainly accept and not return." The Caliph released him and he returned to his people. He then returned to Medina and joined the Muslim armies, fighting in the cause of Allah. But did Abu Bakr make a mistake when he freed Amr? Or did his penetrating insight grasp the essence of this man? And that behind that step was a hidden secret that serves this religion? Who knows? Perhaps Abu Bakr was the most knowledgeable person about the genealogies and secrets of the Arabs. He saw what we did not see and carried in his heart another event that had not yet been revealed. What if that step was part of a greater destiny or a role that had not yet been announced to be continued? An old man stood preparing for a single duel in front of the Roman knights armed with weapons. The young soldiers were surprised by this situation and said, "How can an old man like this fight?" Everyone looked with anticipation at the end of this night. The Roman soldiers said, "How could he fight the Roman youth and knights?" But a loud voice echoed on the battlefield saying, "The enemy will cry blood." He stood before the Roman armies saying to one of their knights, "I have come to change your name from knight to lifeless body." The Roman replied, "So advance, young man, advance." Oh my God, the Roman hordes will finish off this warrior. He brandished his lethal weapon, the Sword of Al-Samsamah, and advanced towards the Roman knight, striking him with a blow that quickly knocked the knight down, then faced him again, killing him. He continued in this manner until he spread terror among the enemy. But did you know that this knight was Amr ibn Madi Karib and that he was over 100 years old? Oh my God, it was as if time had stopped at the threshold of this knight's 30s. During the battle, Amr ibn Madi Karib was injured in the eye, but he continued fighting despite his injury. He contributed to the defeat of the Romans and their flight from the battlefield after displaying great strength in individual confrontations. The Battle of Alcadisa is an epic that would not be complete without mentioning this nobleman who witnessed events that may be stranger than we know. Amr ibn Madi Karib participated in this battle, one of the greatest battles between the Muslims and the Persians. The commander of the Muslims was Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, while Rustam led the Persian army. Before the battle, Sa'd sent some Muslim men to motivate them to fight. Among them, Amr ibn Madi Karib and Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah. Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas asked them to deliver a sermon to the people and encourage them to fight. night before the battle, he was presented with a weak horse. He asked for another one, so they brought him another. He grabbed its tail and pulled it to the ground, causing the horse to fall to its knees. So he threw it back because it wasn't strong enough. Then they brought him a third horse. He repeated the same test, but this time the horse resisted falling, so he said, "This one is stronger than the last one." When the battle began, the Persian commander, Rustam, saw this old man fighting in the front lines. As always, he mocked him, saying, "The Arabs sent their old men to die instead of their young men." This fool soon discovered that this old man, whom he had been mocking, was capable of defeating an entire army. At the height of the battle, Amr charged a huge elephant that was terrorizing the Muslims. He shouted, "Hit the elephants from their trunks, for this is how they will be killed." It is said that in one day he killed 7 elite horsemen of Rustam's army, and every time he killed one of them, he would raise his sword and chant, "I am Abu Thawr, and my sword is Du al-Nun. I strike them like a madman. O Zubaid, they are dying." The fighting between the two armies soon intensified. The Muslims held out strongly. By the grace of Allah, the Persian army began to collapse. Amr was one of the bravest fighters and was almost killed more than once. It is said that one of the Persians saw Amr encouraging the Muslim fighters, and this enraged him, so he shot an arrow at him that hit his shoulder but did not penetrate his armor. Amr noticed the knight and decided to attack him and embrace him until he fell to the ground. Then he killed him and took his weapon and chanted. Amr said, "I am Abu Thawr. I strike them like a mad boy." At one point, he charged the Persian army alone and continued fighting bravely until the Muslims caught up with him. In a separate story, after the battle, a man came to Amr ibn Madi Karib, who had grown old, and said to himself, "To see what remains of Abu Thawr's strength." He put his hand between Amr's leg and the saddle without Amr noticing, but he soon realized what had happened, so he tied his legs to the man's hand and galloped off on his horse, causing the man to run beside him against his will, unable to free his hand. After running exhausted him, Amr laughed and said, "My nephew, what is wrong with you?" He shouted, "My hand is under your leg. Please, let it go." He released him and said, "My nephew, your uncle still has some strength left." The words of Al-Faruq Omar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, were true whenever he saw him and was amazed by his size and height. Even though he was over 100 years old, he would say, "Praise be to Allah who created us and created Omar." Before the battle, Amr ibn Madi Karib was sitting when Al-Nu'man ibn Muqrin entered and said, "O Abu Thawr, you are over 100 years old. Wouldn't it be better for you to stay in the rear?" Amr ibn Madi Karib raised his head, his eyes shining with a fire that the Muslims had known at Yarmouk and Alcadisiyyah. He replied, "Show me the leader of the people and embrace him until I die, or he dies." Al-Nu'man smiled as he remembered how Omar ibn al-Khattab used to say about him, "Praise be to Allah who created us and created Omar." The next morning, Amr stood at the forefront of the ranks, his bent body bearing the history of 120 years of war, but his spirit was like a storm. This battle was called the Conquest of Conquests because it would be the final blow to the Persian Empire. Amr ibn Madi Karib, may God be pleased with him, played a significant role in it. We also touched on an episode that tells the story of the delegation that went to the White Palace of Madain and how this delegation challenged Khosrow, the Persian king. Amr ibn Madi Karib taught Khosrow a lesson he would never forget. In the Battle of Nahavand, Amr ibn Madi Karib was seriously wounded and was carried wounded until he died and was buried in Rauda. It is likely that Amr ibn Madi Karib died at the age of between 113 and 120 years. Ultimately, this companion was an exceptional figure in Islamic history, embodying the meaning of the impossible by fighting at the age of more than a century. His advanced age did not deter him from fighting in decisive battles, as he answered the call of his Lord, striving in the cause of God after history had written for him bright and lost pages of glory and honor. May God be pleased with the brave knight, the great companion, and the distinguished poet Amr ibn Madi Karib al-Zubaidi. May the peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you.